Welcome to the USS Constitution Museum. My name is Anne Grimes Rand. I'm the president of the museum, and I'm so pleased to welcome back so many friends and family for this conversation about Constitution's sale 20 years ago. It's tough for some of us to say 20 years ago here in the room because it feels like yesterday, and I know that's true for many in the audience who participated, who saw, who witnessed, who were a part of the crew 20 years ago. We are also capturing this story for posterity for the museum. Believe it or not, all of us, we are living history now. And we are sharing this, we want to capture the stories we hear today, so that means we have to use microphones, we have to pass microphones back and forth and speak into microphones. It also helps for folks who may be following this conversation on Facebook Live right now. So welcome to our virtual audience, welcome to the audience here in the room. And because we are trying to make sure that everyone can hear, rather than introducing our panelists here, I'm going to ask each of you to introduce yourself. So if you can tell us your name and your role in 1997, as well as where you are now and what you're up to now, then people who are listening over Facebook Live also will have a sense of which voice goes with which person. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Mike, to start us off, okay?
Thank you, Ann. My name's Mike Beck. I was 64th in command of the USS Constitution. I took command in 1995 and left command 5 days after the ship sailed. Today, I'm the head of, I've spent 20 years in education, and I'm the head of a school in Los Olivos, California, named the Dunn School, and I've been there for 10 years.
Good morning, I'm Chad Fox. I was a petty officer on board the USS Constitution from 1995 to 1999, and I currently reside in South Boston, and I work in the restaurant industry.
Fabulous, Chad. Hello, I am Kathleen Rouge. I was a yeoman, Wine 3 petty officer on board the USS Constitution. I came there from the USS Simon Lake, AS-33, September. Mr. Callow right here was with me, and it was a pleasure as one of the only female petty officers. There's only a couple of us that was lucky to go on board that ship and be part of this historic sale. But right now I am a case manager with the Workforce Board in Tampa, Florida. I was a DEVOP. I help veterans. Still today, we get people back into employment, send them back to school. And I still, to this day, tell all my vets, all my CBs, everybody I come across that is a vet, I don't care, all about the USS Constitution, all about Chief Nicholson, Commander Melhuish, Commander Beck, and Chad Fox, of course. There are lots of stories. But we had a wonderful, wonderful time, and there's so many stories to tell. But I won't talk anymore because, you know, I'm Irish and I can talk forever.
Hi, I'm Dan Nicholson. I was newly reported about a month before the sale. I was a chief quartermaster and I served as a navigator on the ship. I continued my service. I retired as a command master chief with 30 years of service, and I run the pre-commissioning unit up in Bath, Maine right now.
Hi, I'm Chris Melhuish, retired Navy captain. My role in the sale was 3 weeks before the ship sailed. Mike Beck invited me to come up to help him out, which I did. With wings on my feet. And during the sale, I was his officer of the deck, so I got to observe at first hand the effect the ship had on the American people, which was no finer way of learning about the ship than to actually see the ship's interaction with the American people. And 4 days after the sale, relieved Mike Beck. After that, I went to Gibraltar as the senior U.S. government representative on the Rock, and that was a phenomenal experience. And then ended up my active duty time on the U.S. Fleet Forces, which is our fleet headquarters command in Norfolk, Virginia, and I'm a civil servant now doing the same job as the head of strategy and policy and international engagement.
Well, thank you. It's interesting to see where roads take people from one moment together on USS Constitution. We are going to talk a little bit about the sale, the preparations, how we came to the moment of the sale, and the aftermath. And I just wanted a sense from the audience, how many of you, we have many crew members who are here. Could you raise your hands if you were a crew member aboard Constitution at that time? Wonderful. And how many are the family and friends of those crew members who raised their hands? Okay. How many folks here were witnesses of the sail event? Okay. And is there anyone here who wasn't alive and is getting their first taste of it today? Thank you. All right. Terrific. Okay, well, I think to start this story, we need to start with, where did the idea to sail Constitution come from? And for that, I'm going to turn it over to Mike.
Thank you, Ann. What I'd like to just say first is thank you for everyone who's here and everyone who's listening. By being here today, by listening today, means that you're not only interested in the USS Constitution, but you're interested in the United States of America, in our future, in our freedom. And the story of sailing Constitution, there are a lot of people that hope to sail the ship throughout history since 1881. For some reason, we were blessed with this moment in time where the ship was able to sail again. And I'll tell you the story, and it's somewhat complex, but it's all true. In 1995, I took command, but a year prior to that, when I was in the process of being told that I was going to go to command USS Constitution, I was at the National War College, and I had commanded a ship called the USS Pegasus when I was 32 years old. Pegasus was the fastest warship in the world. We did drug interdiction out of Key West, Florida, and it was a flying ship built by Boeing, and it was just like an airplane on the water. Constitution is a 200-year-old sailing ship. So my 10-year-old Matthew asked me, he said, "Daddy, why do you want to go from the fastest warship in the world to the slowest warship in the world?" And for those of you who are parents or planning to be parents or have nieces and nephews, you got to tell them the truth. And so I took about 30 days of time to really think deeply about what commanding USS Constitution would be about. And this is the answer I gave to Matthew. I said, "Matthew, the USS Constitution represents not only the values and ideals of the Naval Service, but the values and ideals of our nation. And I have a vision for this ship that putting her under sail will represent America sailing into the 21st century. And what that means to me is that we as an American people can still do hard things if we work together." It was that simple. Matthew looked at me and said, "Okay, Daddy," and he ran off and played. And I was then left with the dilemma. I had to sail the USS Constitution or I wouldn't have told the truth to my son. And that's the story.
And Chad, if there's another. So once you've promised this to your son, I imagine there are a few more steps before it becomes a reality here out in Massachusetts Bay. And I think there were a few other people you may have had to convince who took a little more convincing than Matthew, folks with a fair amount of gold braid on their shoulders. So could you tell us a little bit about that? How do you take this from an idea to a reality in the U.S. Navy?
First of all, I'll just mention that the idea of sailing USS Constitution was something that allowed everybody to visualize what that meant. The ship under sail deals with the imagination in a way. You might have heard the word vision in people saying, use your vision. Well, a vision is like a dream, and what you can do is you can place sails on that ship and imagine what that would be like. And it caught everyone's imagination. And a lot of you are here, whether you're a citizen of the town of Marblehead or you happen to see the event. I hope you share with us today what your experience was. The process, though, of sailing the ship, my next person that I had to show this plan to was a guy named Joe Metcalf. Vice Admiral Metcalf was a very important man in this process. He had retired, but he was the chief of the Surface Navy. And I showed Joe this plan that started in the summer of the plan was this, the summer of 1996, we were going to do Salute to the Nation cruises, where we'd ask teachers all over the country and students to come and be on a turnaround cruise. And then what we did in December of 1995 was we sent out the first email, I think, that we were like the second website. We sent out this Sail Constitution flyer and had 30,000 people in December of 1995 apply to be on these turnaround cruises from all 50 states. And the Constitution Museum with Ann and Margarita Dacey and Bert Logan took the responsibility for creating this curriculum that was going to be a national curriculum about Constitution and shared throughout classrooms by these teachers and tested by these teachers that were on the turnaround cruises. So that process really led us into the summer. I will go back one step, though. To be able to sail Constitution, there was a physical issue. We didn't know if she could sail, right? So a man named Charlie Deans, who was the head of M&R, before I took command in my change of command speech, I said to Charlie, I said, "Can she sail?" And Charlie looked at me and gave me a little smile, and he said, "In a limited way." And so that was, now I knew we could do it. It was a matter of convincing everybody else. There was another aspect of the sail process, because our crew, and you're all out there, our crew, we were tour guides. And our crew not only included tour guides, it included experts in ship restoration, craftsmen and women working together to restore the ship. And I was going to ask them to sail the ship. I think at my change of command speech, when I was talking about sailing Constitution, some of you were probably betting that, like, this guy is crazy. And maybe I was, but the process allowed us together to start down this path. The Salute to the Nation cruises also led to, I'm not trying to take up too much time here, but led to how do we fund those sails? And that's a whole nother story, Ann, but the process of, let me just go quickly because it's very important. The key mechanism to the sailing process for the Navy was something that I wasn't aware of at the time. We started this pennies campaign as a way to fund sails. I had first been introduced to the idea by the museum staff, where I think Ann herself was the one who mentioned that in the 30s, this pennies campaign had restored the ship. And it was an act of citizenship for many people. And it sounded like a quaint, noble idea, but a public relations person in Boston, Heron Ellenson, told me, don't worry about pennies, focus on asking Coca-Cola or some major company to give a donation, and they'll not even ask to put their name on a sail, you know, it won't be like a Diet Coke sign. And I said, well, that sounds good. And this pennies idea was still, my boss in Washington, D.C. was Dr. Bill Dudley, and Bill liked the idea because he was a historian. And so I still wasn't convinced until a woman grabbed my arm and said, on the ship, and I was trying to leave the ship one day, and I felt I was pretty busy, but this woman who was in her 80s grabbed my arm and she said, "Captain, take me around my ship." And I kind of was startled, but I was raised well, and I said, "Yes, ma'am." And I gave her a tour around her ship, and at the end of the tour, she said, "Well done, you're doing a good job, you and the crew, keep it up." And she briskly walked off. As she was walking off, I said, "Ma'am, why is it your ship?" And she said, "Oh, Captain, in the 1930s, this ship came to Seattle, and I gave 10 pennies to help the restoration. That was my first act of citizenship." So what I understood then is that this was the right methodology, and I had an Energizer bunny and a former captain, Bobby Gillen, who volunteered to chair this campaign, and the rest of that story, Bobby can tell you. He's not here today, but it was a national campaign, and I think it raised between $300,000 and $400,000. Some people said $500,000, but we bought all the sails and the running rigging with that. The importance of that story, and I'm telling you this because the ship wouldn't have sailed without that story. In March of 1997, we're supposed to be sailing in July. We still hadn't had Navy permission. Formal permission had not yet come. And I got called to the Pentagon, and I'm a three-striper, folks. I mean, I'm not a four-star, I was nervous to meet a four-star admiral, and the Attorney General of the Navy at the time was a man named Steve Honickman. So the VCNO was Hal Gaiman, and Admiral Gaiman invited me into his office. He was very kind, he was very cordial, he was praiseworthy of all the work we did, and after he gave it great praise, and I'm thinking, yes, he's gonna say, go for it. And he said, but, Captain, we can't sail the USS Constitution. The Navy's had tailhook, it's had a cheating scandal at the Naval Academy. What if somebody fell from the mast and died? They would be awful, and the Navy can't bear that publicity. And I was brokenhearted, I was dejected, I kind of slumped in my chair because I didn't have a plan, but I did know, I had a question for it. I said, Admiral, I do have one question. And he said, what's that? And I said, we've collected $500,000 worth of pennies from school children all over the country. How do I give them back? And he looked at me, then he looked at Mr. Honickman. Stephen Honickman went like this. That was a shrug of his shoulders to all those that can't see me. And the Admiral turned back and looked me in the eye and said, Captain, sail the ship and do it safely. So that started a whole another chain of reaction that he kind of turned over to his aide and said, tell the admirals, and then all of a sudden the whole Navy was upon us and helping us out, starting with you as our public affairs officer.
Well, thank you. It's wonderful to hear what happened behind the scenes to make this sail happen. And you alluded a couple of times to your crew and what it felt like to have a commander say, we're going to sail the ship. And what was the impact for you? What did you think about that? And how did you have to prepare to sail aboard Constitution? Can you tell us about that?
Well, well, it was amazing. I mean, I was 19 years old, and I'm from Colorado. I mean, I'd been on like a fishing boat. I'd never sailed. And we're here in Boston, and we had a crew of about 40 of us come from boot camp, directly from boot camp, which is unheard of back then. And when I checked on board the USS Constitution in October of 1995, I met everybody. Then we get to meet, Commander Michael Beck. You're going to see the old man, like so. And he sat there and he told me what we were going to do. He's like, we are going to sail this, and I'm just intimidated sitting in the captain's office, and I'm just like, but just like he said, this vision of this hasn't been done in 116 years. Nobody alive has done this. And I'm just sitting there and I'm like, all right, wow. And then I'm feeding off his energy. I'm like, I get to be a part of this. And he's like, you're going to be climbing up there, climbing up the rigging. And I'm like, wow, I get, climb up this big old ship, and it's amazing. And we started this process of sail training, and the Coast Guard had a really, really big hand in the training of us. I mean, huge, to be honest with you. And I think they give our hats off to the Coasties. They were amazing. And we went down to Groton, Connecticut, and we got on board the Coast Guard Eagle, which is one of their ships down at the academy. It's a big 4-masted ship, and it has the sails, and we went from Groton, Connecticut all the way down to Puerto Rico, and doing sail training, and something none of us had ever done. None of us. And I knew then, like, and I loved the adventure, and I'm like, this is really cool. Like, I'm like, people would pay $20,000 to take this trip. Like, hey, I'm gonna sail this boat, like, as a record, because it was amazing. And knowing then, like, what I'm learning here, I'm like, I get to apply it to sailing on the USS Constitution. And like Commander Beck said, you know, we were tour guides, and so we were so knowledgeable about, like, you know, how the sailors lived and how they worked and what they did, and we just knew that from books, knew that from coming, you know, learning from Anne and Bert Logan, and like what the USS Constitution Museum taught us crew, and like we're so grateful for what you did for us too. And but now to be able to, like, wow, now it's living history. Now we're gonna climb the masts, and we're gonna set 7 sails, and we're going up to Marblehead, and like not knowing this is like an amazing job that we're doing, but like, you know, we're focused as a crew, especially us, like, you know, the enlisted, and not everybody worked hard, but we're just so focused on what we're doing, not realizing what this meant to this country, what this meant to the Navy. And, you know, I've heard this story from Commander Beck before that you just heard, like, you know, there's a lot of things that had to happen for this to happen, and we were trained properly, and, you know, Mike Beck was climbing the rigging right with us, and just showing us the way. There's nothing that we did that he didn't do, and, you know, but I just knew at that point, this is something special. This is something that I'm 19 years old and I get to be a part of, and like there's so many people that more worthy than me that could have done that, but like for some reason that God, fate chose me, and along with many other men and women to do this. It was special, and to this day it's still very special. But when we actually left Boston Harbor and we were towed out going up to Marblehead, to see these thousands of ships, and like we had a Navy like police escort going up there, like you couldn't get. But I'm like, we're just sitting there like, wow, like man, people care about this. And then we pulled into Marblehead, and it was like we were like celebrities. I mean, it was people were there and like cheering, and it's so patriotic, and I just really want this country to do the same thing like that now. But it was amazing, and it was an embrace. We were like movie stars, but we had a task, and we had a job at hand, and we executed it. And I mean, every man and woman on that ship. But I mean, we're up there. We set sail, and when our executive officer, she's not here right now, she was Claire Bloom. When they dropped the tow line and said, right now the USS Constitution is sailing under her own power for 116 years. There was not a dry eye on that ship, and it was amazing. It was amazing. So I was just glad to be part of it, and so that's all I got.
Oh, God. Okay, let's just face it. Being a female in the Navy is hard enough already. So to be selected to come from a subtender, driving amphibious assault crafts, being a yeoman in port services, it was an absolute complete honor. And the same thing with me. Coming to the Constitution and looking up at the rigging, I'm like, thank God I was a tomboy and I climbed a lot of trees. Because I was like, you gotta be kidding me. But once you get up there and the camaraderie with your crew, and everybody together, and all these, and I thought I was a lot older than everybody, but I really wasn't. I was a couple of years older. But the young girls, I said, you know what? Like our XO, Claire Bloom, if they can do it, these guys can do it, the women can do it, and we can do it better, and we're going to do it. And it didn't matter. If you're a female in the military, you always have to remember we can do anything the guys can do, and you're gonna do it better, and that's it. And that's how you strived in the Navy. You know, it was hard, especially for us that were on other ships and going in, and I was in the Seabees after, so it was really tough. But like Chad was saying, we felt like celebrities. It was something. I'll tell you a little story. I don't know if you guys remember the movie Civil Action. John Travolta was here filming a movie out here on the wharf. And I remember I was late for muster, YN1 Pate. I was telling him that I just gave the key grips a tour of the ship. And he's like, why are you late for muster? And I said, listen, they want to meet us. And he goes and yells at Stetcar and all them. And he goes, come on, Rouge, let's go. So we run across the Navy Yard. And there comes John Travolta, comes out of his trailer, towel around his neck, the makeup on. I'm standing at attention with YN1 Pate. I'm more nervous to see John Travolta. You gotta be kidding me. So he comes out and he looks at us, and he's more impressed to see us in uniform. So there's YN1 Pate, and he goes, Vinny, and I go, Barbarino. And there, out he comes, giving us a big handshake. It was just unbelievable for us young sailors, and you have celebrities. We were on board with Walter Cronkite, Neil Armstrong, Ted Kennedy, Secretary of Navy, Secretary of Defense, Chief of Naval Operations. We got Al Gore on a tug. I mean, come on. It was unbelievable. And for all of us, the sail training, and to be in, we were on the Bounty. You never, come on, we can't forget Captain Robin.
No way.
You know, I mean, when I was down in Florida, in St. Pete and Tampa, when Sandy hit, I just couldn't believe that. I wish to God that maybe a different decision was made. But we have all been through a lot, from being stationed on board to the USS Cole, and we all know we lost our shipmate. And then 9/11, I lost friends in 9/11. And then going into the Seabees, and the war hit, and I know a lot of us that were still in, we lost a lot of our shipmates, we lost a lot of our friends. But I'm gonna tell you, being on the USS Constitution and being with this wonderful group of people, they instilled in us the values of honor, courage, and commitment, and what it is to be in the United States Navy, and to have love for each other. There is no race, there's no nothing, there's no discrimination. When you're together, there's one color, and that's blue. And we all love each other, and that's the way it should be. And I hope that we all, when we leave here today, that we remember all that served with us. And going forward, I pray that God help us. I really hope that we all, with the way the world is going today, we just have to pray and stay together and love one another. That's all I gotta say. Thank you.
Thank you for the recollections. I know there are recollections on this side as well, so we want to hear your recollections of that day.
I don't think I could have heard a more eloquent description of what it means to serve the United States Navy than what you just heard. That was phenomenal. Kathleen, thank you for that. My own recollection, I have two, well actually a lot, but two that I think are germane during the sail. One was when we pulled into Marblehead. There was a CNN reporter, his name was Gary Tuchman, you probably have heard of him. And I remember watching a video of him talking about the sail, and in the background was the Constitution moored in Marblehead. It seemed like a perfect place for the ship to be at that particular point in time. And Gary Tuchman said, you know, the ship is like a mirror. It's not really about the Navy per se, it's a mirror in which every American can look at themselves when they look at the ship. And I thought that was one of the most insightful comments. The second one was, again, at Marblehead. The crew had been divvied out to various places around town to share the experiences with the citizens of Marblehead. And I was in, I think, the East Corinthian Yacht Club. And the Master Chief Petty Officer of the Navy came up to me and said, "Sir, you're needed outside." Of course, I wasn't quite sure what that meant. Bad things flashed through my head, you know, the ship was sinking, or the sailor had been beaten up, or something like that. But no, it was none of that. I went outside, and on the steps of the yacht club was this 10-year-old boy. And he had a coffee can. And around the coffee can was the Pennies for Old Ironsides flyer. His name was Trip. So I looked around, and there was his mom and Tripp's friend, a young girlfriend. And there were some women there, and everyone was crying. And so I knew that something was different. And so I leant down and talked to Tripp and said, "What's this about?" And he said, "I collected these pennies when I was a Cub Scout in memory of my father, who was a Navy veteran who died. I later learned that he died of cancer a couple of years beforehand. And he gave it to me, and that expression that he had in his face reflects exactly what Mike Beck said earlier, which is this faith in the Navy, faith in the ship, faith in the crew that we would do the right thing. And 10 years later to the day, we had a reunion, the same spot, and Tripp was then going through Brown University. An amazing American, solid American citizen. And so we honored him that day for remembering and doing the right thing. So those are my two particular memories. I have a lot of other memories, but those are the two that stand out that I think reflect what you've heard already.
So, being a command master chief and the guy that is charged with taking care of the sailors, I'd like to point out that in my 30 years of service, all over the world, 10 or 15 different ships, I've been in combat, I've been blown up. This crew, and when I say crew, I'd like to point out there was only 40 of us, 40 or 50, but we took in the M&R detachment, the Park Service, the museum. We had Naval Academy midshipmen. We had Marine Corps reservists. We had Marine Corps active duty. We had the 1812 Marines. We had Navy reservists. So the crew of 40 became a crew of hundreds. There was 100 of us, and that's what it took to make this event happen. And I always look back, and it was just, we were one crew, we were one family, and the bond we had, and your ability, Captain, to bring everyone together to make this happen, I think just speaks millions. It was a great time. But there was a lot of us that did it, and it wasn't just the Navy. There was a lot of folks.
Well, thank you. And Mike, do you have reflections of that moment of seeing the sails set off of Marblehead?
Chris Melhuish and I have talked many times about this, and when you have a vision of the future, what I truly remember, Ann, was that this was like a movie that had played in my mind, and it was the unfolding of this movie. I'll tell you a significant part for me, because I'm a man of faith. One of the things that, before we left Charlestown that week, we're in a very Catholic neighborhood here, and I'm a Protestant, but my wife's a Catholic, and she said, well, there's a Catholic priest over there, if you want to say prayer. And I went over and I saw him, and I said, can I talk to you about some prayers for the ship? Because it was a couple days before the sail. And he said, yes, my son, I'll pray for your safety, I'll pray for the crew's safety and the ship's safety. And I said, no, Father, I'm a Protestant. We're very specific in our prayers. I'd like winds from the northeast at 5 to 10 knots. No more, no less. He looked at me, he smiled, and said, okay, we'll pray about that. And so at 11:45 on the 21st, we set sail stations. And Matt Millen, it's Matt Millen, right? Matt Millen, about a 6'4" kid from Texas, a lanky kid from Texas. You're not here today, Matt, but Matt came up to me as we set sail stations, and he said, Captain, there's no wind. And I looked at him and I said, go to your sail stations, it's already been taken care of. At 12 noon, a humble breeze, probably 3 to 5 knots, came up and filled the sails, and Claire Bloom announced that we were under sail, and the Blue Angels, which was your vision, flew over top. And what that reflection was for me is talking about those values that we represent together, everyone here in this room. And we have to remember that the values of those Blue Angels who flew overhead and the values of the sailors on the ship, it could have been 200 years ago, the values are, even though the technology was different, the values are the same. And that gave us freedom 200 years ago, and we need to hold on to those values of honor, courage, and commitment so we're a free nation 200 years in the future. That's the lesson I learned, Ann.
Well, thank you. It's wonderful to be able to share these magical moments, and I know that there are as many magical memories in the crowd as there are, as we've been able to hear right now. We also want to carry the story forward because from that moment, being aboard Constitution, feeling the sails fill, feeling the deck lift, seeing this ship underway for the first time in 116 years is magical. And then 5 days later, we had a change of command, and it was Chris's turn to take leadership of this wonderful crew that had forged so tight a bond and to look at the next steps for Constitution. So could you tell us a little bit about that?
So I do actually have one experience that predates the sale, the actual sale, but I think it's germane and it links to ultimately how I viewed the ship. We actually had a rehearsal, a dress rehearsal, a couple of days, I think, before the sale. We went out in Massachusetts Bay. I hasten to say the ship was still connected, so it did not sail free. But when the main topsail took the wind, the ship shook. And you know what I'm talking about, those of you nodding your head. And we never felt that ever again. But I got the distinct sense the ship was alive, and that she just shook with joy at the prospect of being able to sail on her own power. We all felt that. There were tears coming down people's faces. We all looked at each other and said, "Did you feel that?" And that's when I realized the ship was alive. The second thing is that Mike is an excellent schoolmaster. And so what he did in the 3 weeks that I was on board before the sale, through the sale, and the change of command is he basically said, you better be thinking about this ship, what it means to you, and how you're going to contribute to the ship's future. So I gave that some very serious thought. Could not have had a finer schoolmaster in Mike. He showed me demonstrably what the ship did, its effect, its phenomenon on the American people. And I went, wow. So there was another point, which was the evening before the ship left for Marblehead. There was a silent movie played on the pier. It was called Old Ironsides. You remember that? A classic movie. And we had an organist from, I think, Boston Pops play alongside. And it was played, it was shown on the pier right alongside the ship. And the ship was illuminated and looking magnificent. And at the very end of that movie, there's a line in there that says, sail on, O ship of state. And those of you know that comes from Longfellow's poem. And it just resonated with me. I kept thinking, ship of state, ship of state, ship of state. And we sailed, and it reinforced that. And then Mike told me just before the change of command, you better have that vision ready to go. You need to think about it. And so me, the vision of the ship was reinforced that it was America's ship of state. And so how could I bring the ship to the American people? Because clearly, when it's out away from Boston, in a slightly different environment, it really resonates. I saw it resonating with the American people. So we had this vision of taking the ship down to New York City in the millennium, 2000, with the President of the United States on board, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, various other notables, and reviewing the reviewing platform for the International Naval Review. And so I described this to the Naval History and Heritage Command combat artist, who's a guy called Captain John Rouge. And he drew, and I don't know if you have that drawing somewhere, but so he drew this sketch, which went to the First Lady Hillary Clinton, and it resonated in the White House, is all I can say. And so we started moving forward on that. We had a plan of action to take it up in very incremental steps, first to Gloucester, then the next day from Gloucester up to Portsmouth, go back to where she had originally come from. And then the following year down to Newport, going through the Cape Cod Canal, striking down her topmasts, getting her sufficient air draft. That's the top of the mast to the bottom of the Bourne Bridge and Sagamore Bridges. And then the following year, going through the protected waters of Long Island Sound down to New York City. This would sort of be a replica of what President John F. Kennedy wanted to do with the ship in the 1960s. He actually wanted the ship to go down to New York City, be part of an event down there, and that got turned off. So you can see here the drawing by the combat artist, John Rouge, and I think he captured it very well. That was kind of my vision. I can talk more about that in terms of all the work that we did that went into that at a later point, but that's basically kind of the view that I had.
Well, that is a wonderful vision, and we know there was lots of work that went into that on both of your parts. And I think just to help us all understand a bit more of the story, if you could carry forward with a little bit of that and a little more about what happened during your command as you were working toward this.
I could not have had a finer command master chief than Dan Nicholson. And none of this would have been able, I could not have had the opportunity to think without having a senior enlisted as able, as intellectual, as dedicated as the gentleman sitting to my left. Without him, I just would not have had the opportunity to even think about this stuff. So he basically ran the ship. I basically started to think about the vision thing. We got buy-in from the United States Navy up to the Secretary of the Navy. In fact, we actually had the Secretary of Defense was invited by the Secretary of the Navy to ride the ship up to Portsmouth. The governor of Massachusetts wrote to the Secretary of the Navy asking for the ship to visit Gloucester. Those are formal correspondence, pieces of correspondence. So there was a lot of buy-in. We then had the Naval Sea Systems Command conduct very extensive sea trials that cost the Navy in excess of $250,000. Outfitted the ship with all sorts of sensors, hydrodynamic measuring devices, and so on and so forth. And in May of 1998, we went out into Massachusetts Bay, and the ship was towed at speeds up to 10.5 knots. Up to that point, the ship's fastest speed under tow is about 8 knots. For every knot of speed that you increase, the pressure against the bow increases exponentially, for those of you that aren't aware of that. We towed the ship out into international waters for the first time since 1934. It was an amazing thing for me, conning the ship. I'm a former destroyerman. But to see the ship under tow respond when the wheel was turned by 1 or 2 spokes, to watch the jibboom come round. The jibboom is that long pole that sticks out in the front of the ship. And be able to navigate the same way as navigating a destroyer behind another destroyer, doing what we call divisional tactics. A very, very, very sensitive, responsive ship. The point there being is if we did not use the wheel, the ship would naturally pull out to starboard. It would yaw out there. So the point behind having the wheel was to minimize the pressure on the bow of the ship. So after 10 hours or so in Massachusetts Bay, the maximum movement detected in the hull of the ship was 1/10 of an inch. The ship is built very well. There was nothing in the Naval Sea Systems Command report that indicated the ship was unseaworthy. Shortly after that, we had the American Bureau of Shipping come on board and do a material assessment. These are the professionals, and they found the same thing. So we had a body of evidence going in. The ship was structurally sound. We were able to tow it for 10 knots. Maximum movement was 1/10 of an inch, so we felt very comfortable about that. Secretary of Navy was on board. The governor of Massachusetts was on board. And then things sort of unraveled at that point. We can talk about that later if you like.
Rather than that, let's talk for a moment about the strength of the ship, because we have just had the privilege of watching 2 years in dry dock here, seeing that wonderful hull exposed again, that sleek bow you were speaking of, that incredible keel, and we've had the privilege of watching the folks who we all thought of as the Maintenance and Repair Division are now the shipwrights and ship restorers of the Naval History Heritage Command Detachment Boston, still doing the same great work. But I wonder who would like to speak to the work that was done in preparation for the 1990s time when you were aboard. Would you like that one?
Sure. As we talk about the Maintenance and Repair Division from the Historic Center as part of the Historic Detachment, these people are master craftsmen and craftswomen, quite honestly. From the historians who discovered the missing diagonal riders, I think that was Patrick Oughton, who was responsible for doing the sleuthing and investigation into drawings that were in fact held in Greenwich, I believe, and captured or brought back to the United States, or at least understood these diagonal riders gave the ship the strength to have the shape that she does of a sailing yacht to go at a high speed, but be able to carry all those guns. That shouldn't have been possible, but what that technology represented and what it represents to me is sort of that I called it the stealth technology of the day. Maybe for you younger people, it's to think about the iPhone, the next iPhone that's going to come out, and it's that high-tech vision that America is able to grasp and understand and execute. So the ship has all those qualities, but it's made special by the crew and the captains. Early on in American history, you can study the captains of the ship and what they were not only competent, but they trained the crew to a level of professionalism that outgunned and defeated every foe, 50-0, right? And so it's that combination of American ingenuity and our dedication to each other and to hard work that she is a ship that I'll call blameless. She is almost sacred, as Chris and I have talked about many times.
Thank you. There are many heads nodding in the room when we talk about how special this ship is, and I know there are also many people in the room who may have questions that they would like to ask of our panel. So if you do have questions in the room, my friend Brian in the red shirt has a microphone so that folks in the room and beyond can hear questions, and we'd like to open it up.
And could I just ask, the one thing that is meaningful to me is that each of you that observed the sail were part of that. You have your own emotions and understanding of that day. I just, if you wouldn't mind just sharing those. I mean, you don't have to have a question, but just share where you were, who you are, and what effect it had on you.
Well, can you hear me? Yeah. Okay, so I was the public affairs officer for this event. I'd like to say two things in particular. One was that if you're gonna keep a ship or an airplane for display, you do a certain amount of work to get it to look good. But if you know you're gonna use it, if you're gonna fly it, or you're gonna sail it, you put different energy into it. And Mike, when you had that conversation with Charlie Deans, you made a whole sea shift there. People knew that they had to do different stuff to make things not only look good, but had to be strong enough. So I think that this was one of the huge things that made this possible, was those craftsmen that put forth that effort to make that ship come alive. And I remember that feeling when you described it, Chris, about how the ship came alive. That was a magic feeling that was unmistakable. The second thing was that it was my job as the public affairs officer to paint a picture. I mean, we had this physical thing that we were going to do, But we needed to communicate to the American people and the people around the world, what was the meaning of this? Why were we doing this? And to me, the whole idea was that the mission of the United States Navy in 1997, as it is today, was the same mission as it was in 1997. That we were going to stand up and be a naval power. We were going to stand up to tyranny anywhere in the world. We were going to keep the sea lanes free. We were going to make sure that there was commerce, safe commerce and safe passage for people. That's what we were all about. And so, as I've looked at history, as I've looked at the Constitution representing that history, a tangible thing that you can actually touch, here was a great opportunity to paint this great picture for the American people. And the idea that we'd take the ship out by itself was cool enough. But the idea of putting two Navy ships, current Navy ships, in formation with it, not only gave us platforms to put all those media on board that came out of everywhere, but it also gave us the opportunity to have those ships in the same picture. And then when I called up the Blue Angels and said, could you guys come down here? They jumped at the chance, because that gave them an opportunity to participate in painting this picture, that picture right there. And then when it went to the idea of we're going to put our sailors up there and what are they going to wear, to me, if you're going to tell the story, paint this picture that it's the United States Navy doing this, we didn't want to be showing something that looked like sail training, that it was some sloop or some other ship or some yacht club that was doing this. We wanted this to be the United States Navy. And so I went to Admiral Langston and said, we need these sailors aloft wearing white Cracker Jacks. They need to look like U.S. Navy sailors. So we spent the money and we made that happen, all part of painting this picture. And then on the day of the event, the media came in droves and droves and droves and droves. We had media from around the world. It was the coolest thing ever to tell that story and to remind ourselves of the history. There was one time as we were preparing for the sale that I was doing a little video and I was sitting on the keel and I reached over and I touched the keel and I said, this was original. This was part of the battle with the Guerriere. And as I was saying that, I realized that was old wood before it was even cut. I went and checked with Charlie Deans, and it was 400 years old before it was cut. So I'm sitting on a 600-year-old piece of timber that was part of what I read about in the 5th grade. This was the ship. This was an original part of the War of 1812. This was an original part of the blockade of Tripoli, 1801 to 1804. This is original. I'm sitting on it. This is magic. This is the kind of stuff we need to be talking about to America. Thank you. And one more thing. The Navy originally didn't want to do this public affairs event, and so I got the opportunity to do it. And after the fact, we got the Public Relations Association of America's highest award, the Silver Anvil, for the event.
Hello, I'm just a member of the public, but I was there for the sale. I was on one of those Boston Harbor chartered sales, and I remember when, I don't know exactly how it happened, but I remember when somebody on the boat announced, she's under sale, she's under sale. It came through a microphone, and people either totally began to cheer, and the other half just went dead silent. And there were a lot of vets on that cruise. It was just, you paid $50 or something, but it was, everybody just on our one little boat was so impressed. It was just amazing. That said, I have actually some technical questions, because a number of people have mentioned it's different from having a ship sit and look pretty, and it's different to actually have it sailing. So I wondered if somebody could give an overview of what needed to be done to make it possible to strengthen the masts or whatever and get the sails up there so that the ship could sail undamaged. If there's somebody who could talk to that, that would be really great.
You and I chatted a little bit about it. The nature of a wooden ship is that it in fact is made out of wood, and so you're not you're dealing with nature itself. I can remember in April of 1997 we had an ice storm, which remember one of you guys came to my house at like 11 o'clock at night. Captain, the main mast has broken off of the, I mean, it was like, how are we going to fix this? But the fact is that the repairs and having great craftsmen, and back in the day, those things would break at sea, and there were people on board that, on part of the crew of 500 that were craftsmen that would remake whatever was necessary to sail that ship. That's what M&R represented. They represented those same craftsmen today, and things broke, and we would repair them. It wasn't metallurgy that we could X-ray and have specs on. It was wood. So the best you can do is to recognize this is safe for these conditions, and then not to go beyond those conditions. And we took safety very seriously, and everybody on the crew was not afraid to say if something was amiss or we needed to take care of.
Like the captain said, safety was obviously our safety was paramount, and then the ship as well, but like the maintenance repair guys, they were just, and women, they were unbelievable how they are doing a job that had been done 200 years ago, and they're doing it currently, and which is just, to be able to be a craftsman like that is just, it blows my mind. But everything, like I said, the ship was worthy. She was seaworthy. She was strong, and I have to kind of reiterate what Commander Melhuish said when that wind hit the topsail, and you felt that ship move. It gives me chills. But it's like she took a big breath, and she's like, "All right, I'm ready to go. Let's kick off the training wheels. This is amazing."
You just reminded me. Is it Howard Chitterton? Chatterton, who was part of the Naval Sea Systems Command, but Howard created a model of Constitution talking about using modern day technology to see how the ship would react, and they put it in a tow tank at the Naval Academy, and under 15 knots of wind she was going to heel to starboard. If the wind was from the port side, aft the beam on the port side, she'd heel to starboard at 4 degrees, and she would make knot for knot through the water. When we had her under loose tow, that dynamic actually occurred. Well, that's what we saw, and it was quite amazing. The other thing that I have to remember here, you reminded me of it. We had a whole detachment of naval engineers that were down below decks, making sure that if water or anything happened, which it could have, that they would be responding with all the equipment necessary to protect the ship. So we took every step to make sure that we covered anything that might have happened. You talked about Captain Robin. Well, Captain Robin Woolbridge was he stood beside me, and beside him was a man named David Wood. David Woods was the captain of the Eagle. If anything went wrong, they were there to tell me what to do, because I might have been the captain, but I really didn't know anything about sailing. So I confess, it's true. I hope that answers your question. Commodore of the Marblehead Yacht Club is here, the former Commodore. Commodore, can you give me your remembrance?
Thanks. Thank you, Commander. My name is Peter Conway. I'm the past Commodore of the Boston Yacht Club. And what a high point it was, not only for us at the Yacht Club, but the town. Such a major event. When we first found out that the Navy was considering sailing the ship to Marblehead, the town was beyond excited. The Constitution came in during the War of 1812 to be protected by the guns from Fort Sewell when she was being chased by the 2 British frigates. So, and she came back again in the 30s with the Penny tour. So we have photos of that. So when she was going to come back, possibly again, this was more than exciting. And of course, we thought that the Navy was picking Marblehead for all the obvious reasons. One of course, is we're the birthplace of the American Navy. Well, we knew that, but the Navy didn't seem to know that. And at one of the first meetings which we had at the Boston Yacht Club with Admiral Langston and the commander and a few others, we were all excited, to going on about the birthplace of the American Navy. And I can remember looking over and seeing all these officers looking at each other, going, "What?" And so I guess it was our secret we hadn't let out yet. But anyway, they picked Marblehead for a lot of other reasons. Of course, its proximity to Boston and how important it was to keep the ship safe. The fact that we had a number of yacht clubs that could provide a fleet of launches to get people out to the boat, out to the ship to see it. So many great moments of emotion for that weekend. The opening ceremonies at the Corinthian Yacht Club with the Navy band playing still raises the hair on the back of my neck when I think of that. The speeches, some a little longer than they should have been. But looking out with the Navy band playing and the ship right off at the mouth was pretty majestic. A lot of great parties over those 2 nights. But being aboard for the sail was certainly one of the high points of my life. And I was fortunate enough to have my children aboard. And I remind my son, he's the youngest person that ever sailed on the Constitution that's still around. Being on everybody having to climb on that center hatch when the sailors were pulling all the lines to raise the sails, and we're all crowded in together. And a Navy officer looked at me and he said, "Excuse me, sir, I don't recognize that uniform. What Navy are you with?" And I said, and I tried to sound as important as I could. I said, "Well, that's the Boston Yacht Club, and I'm a Commodore." He goes, "Oh, very good, sir. Sorry." Yeah. Very exciting when Walter Cronkite took the wheel and said, "Prepare to come about." Was pretty funny. But anyway, a great moment, a great time. The town, certainly the high point in my life for our town to pull off their end of the deal. And it went along so beautifully between what you folks did here and what the Navy did and the Marines and the people on land, that all came together to make this such a spectacular event. Couldn't have been better.
I just have to recognize a former captain, Dave Cashman, who is a Marblehead resident, and Dave is not here, but he's the one that said, "Mike, if you're going to take it anywhere, take it to Marblehead, and that can be the place we leave from." So I just, if anybody from Marblehead is here and you put your hands up, I just want to thank you so much because, again, the values we talk about with regard to collaboration and all these different organizations working together, your community came out and loved us during that time there, and we have a special affinity and affection that I didn't say thank you at the time, but from the bottom of my heart, and I knew on behalf of the crew, thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. Are there others who have recollections to share? Yes.
I just want to talk a little bit about she talked about the future, and I can tell you I'm still active duty. My name's Craig Cole. I'm the Command Master Chief at the War College in Newport. Currently, I was Seaman Recruit Cole during the sail on the 4-mast crew, so thank you. You know, I have 2 children now, a beautiful wife who's hanging out in the back over there. And my kids ask me all the time, because they've been around ships for 20 years. So my son and my daughter, you look at Google, right? You can Google anything. Well, she Googled my name, Fireman Cole, one day, and there's probably 4 or 5 pictures that came right up of the sail training and the Coast Guard Eagle and the HMS Bounty and the tall ships that came in, and we got to go on and climb the masts and the rigging on all the ships in Boston. But, you know, he's got his daughter and her friend here, and you know, I asked her, I said, did you have any idea your dad was famous? And she said, no, I didn't. So, but he is. And but the future, they don't teach this type of history anymore. And I think it's important that we use the museum and the ship to continue that. And I do it every day. I have every day that I've been in the Navy. I always talk about the Constitution, because you know, that's the top picture in my office. The block of keel that we got when we left, and the walking stick, I explained that, and how Isaac Hull instituted some of that stuff, and the history. And I continue to do that because of the people that are sitting in this room. They set the baseline for me as a sailor in the Navy, and I've continued that, and I will continue that until I retire in 2021. So. But I want to thank you all and all the people in this room that made this event possible, because it set the baseline for me and a few other sailors. Myself, Frankie Valdivinos, who's a command master chief on a flat deck amphib out in San Diego right now, and Chester Santiago, who the 3 of us left the same week. We all went to 3 different ships, and Santiago went to the Cole. Deployed and did not come home. So we always remember him every year through social media. Our crew from 1997, we kind of reunite almost every year since that point on October 12th. And with the ship's birthday coming up here next week, which happens to be my daughter's birthday as well. We did not plan that, but... And it's Chad's birthday, but we always forget that one. So, but I just want to say, you know, the sailing, the people that were on board, we really didn't, and those 2 really discussed it well, we really didn't understand the magnitude. But when we came back from Marblehead, we were pulling back into Boston Harbor. It was twilight, the sun was going down, and there were boats and lighters, and the pier was literally like pulling into a football stadium that was with 100,000 people yelling and screaming, and news crews, and it was so overwhelming. And we're up on the rigging, and we're all looking at each other like, what just happened? Is this really happening? And the pictures, I mean, my mom still got this stuff up on the wall, because I'm a local guy. I'm from Gloucester, Massachusetts. So to be able to sail a ship in my home state with some of the best sailors I've ever sailed with in my almost 21 years in the Navy is awesome. So thank you.
Thank you. I know there are other crew members with recollections you might like to share.
My name is Bill Cowell. I was a fireman on the Constitution. Many good days. Okay. I had a wonderful time. My time was short. I was on board for 1.5 years. I regretted getting out. Should have stayed in. But best times I had was here. With all the crew, my shipmates, Commander Beck. My time was short with Commander Melhuish and Chief Nicholson there. It was, I have a lot of fond memories. It flew by. As being on board for that day of the sail, I was aloft, setting sails, and once she did catch the wind, like Chad Fox just explained it, she just picked up and flew. And it was a rush to be up there. The feeling is so indescribable, what you felt being aboard. The ship hasn't sailed for 116 years. And to be a crew member on board to be one of the guys setting the sails. Like everybody said, we had no idea the importance and the feeling that would come from it. And they're right, because at that time I was like, okay, no, whatever. That was my job, I did my job. But now I look back at it and get choked up. We made history. We're still here, we're living proof. We're living history now. And to look back on 20 years and wow, how it's flown by. It's indescribable. I have a good friend of mine, Steve Cleasy. He was on board. He was supposed to be out here with us. Him and I were thicker than thieves. He was with Kathleen and I over in Simon Lake. But, oh yeah, and he was up there with me, different places on the ship. And he would say the exact same thing I know we've all said. And it's just an amazing feeling. And to look back at it and see what we've done now and to where we actually grasp it now and understand what we've done was just unbelievable. Tried to explain to my daughter here what it is because she thought the Constitution was like the Mayflower. Like, no, it's really, no, it's not. And it's sad because they, like Craig mentioned earlier, they don't teach this in school like they should. You know, she has no idea. She's a freshman in high school now. No idea about the Constitution. So today she's in for a little bit of an education. But I'm just blessed that I was able to be part of it, to meet so many wonderful people, and have them in my life. I still keep in touch with many of them through social media still, and it's been great. And I thank you all for everything.
We know Rory, Dave, you guys are good.
Norman has to talk to.
Yeah. Yep.
Norman, you're next, buddy.
Yep.
Is that Tregenza? Good to see you. I don't. You know, my head has been. Am I in a good spot here? I can come up over here. Let me grab a seat here. You're handing me a microphone. Come on. My emotions have been all over the place since this panel began. We talked a little bit yesterday about the captain has this way of speaking and just rips into you and just looks at you. And then Fox and Rouge, Petty Officer Fox and Petty Officer Rouge, they started talking about how some things haven't gone the way you'd want them to have gone, from the cold to 9/11, and then I started getting a different kind of ball of feeling. Oh, hey there. And I want to hear more from Captain Melhuish about what happened with the SAIL 2000 plan. I don't know exactly how that went off the rails. And then I started thinking, well, I want to scream out and say, what's next? What's going to happen in 2020, 2030? Like, let's take this ship, let's do something. Hopefully my crew card will get me on board. But I don't know. I guess that was part of my. I've been riding a little roller coaster back there. I couldn't sit still because there's so many memories and so many things to think about now and the future. I guess if I'm going to share anything. It was a story that I told a little bit last night. The day of the sail, as the Blue Angels flew over our head, I kind of followed them and turned, and I saw Captain Beck standing there, and we made eye contact for a second, and I just kind of leaned over and said, "How does it feel?" Like seconds after the Blue Angels went by. And again, with those eyes, he just goes, "Awesome." That was it. That was just that split second, but it imprinted in my memory so vividly. The Marblehead thing. The crew members stayed we were welcomed in by residents of Marblehead. I would love to find out who I stayed with. I don't know if there's a record of that, or I'm not going to do one of those, what do they call it when you meet somebody on the train and then you post on social media, like, you know. I was with FT2 Kevin Ray and myself, and we were welcomed into this beautiful home, and I would love to, you know, shake hands and chat a little bit about their experience if the person out in Marblehead remembers his face. Very similar face, a little bit less hair, and for some reason my front 2 teeth seem to have spread apart a little bit. We should talk about that. We'll talk about that later. I don't understand. Who gets braces at like 41 years old? I mean, I think I might need braces. Is there anything else you guys want to talk about, or anybody else feeling anything? Norman Tregenza is one of the more unique people from the crew of the Constitution. You know what? I'm gonna MC this from the rest of the day. We'll just give it back, and I'll talk.
You stay right here. Don't leave.
Look, give me one.
Oh, yeah,
I got to
you
introduce you here. If there was a crew member who embodied that spirit, you know, we talk about sometimes you're in a moment. We're going to sail the ship. It hasn't been done in over 100 years, and you feel like then it's over, and you look back and you're like, I didn't get it. There are a couple people who get it. You know, Captain Beck, he knew the significance. He could feel it, and you hope to get that from him. This man right here, this man got it. This man knew from, well, at least from the day that I met him, that he was a part of something extremely special, and was the kind of guy who was never late, took everything serious, knew you were the man. And you taught me the poem.
Thank you, Locke.
You taught me the poem. Everybody, former fireman Tregenza.
Oh, no. You stay here. No, yeah. Okay. When Lockowitz did the tours, Lockowitz talked, okay?
What?
Oh, yeah.
A very shy
Talk. And Lockowitz he did great tours. He did great tours. And there was this one tour, you probably don't even remember this, but he was in the middle of a tour and he came to a pause and he stopped. And a lady from the audience, she said, "Don't stop talking." And Lockowitz said, "My mother would love to hear you say that." Do you remember that?
I don't, but...
Oh, it happened.
It's definitely something that you probably...
There were a couple of things that made being on Old Ironsides just so incredible. And a big factor was the pennies. I'm so glad that we did the pennies in the 90s, because when we had people come on board the ship, there were 75-year-old people, or even people older than that, who had given a penny in 1930-something. And they wanted to come back and see the ship, because when they were in 4th grade, they gave a penny. And I cannot tell you how many times I gave a tour and there was somebody in that audience that had given a penny, or I had just encountered them in the Navy Yard, or anyway, it was a very significant thing, and it was great that that was continued again. Another thing that was kind of interesting was climbing the rigging, which I got to tell you, I'm not really happy about heights. Okay, you know, I mean, handle them. Okay, all right, but you know, you're pretty high up, and if you let go, you don't just land in the water. I mean, you land on a flat. You know, it's not nice to think about, and that's what you think about a lot of times when you're up there, because you're holding onto the rigging. You got this line. You got one hand on one line, the other hand on another line, and then you look down. Of course, we had these clips that we would clip onto a line when we got to our destination. But when you're going from one place to another, you're not clipped. And anyway, it was definitely an interesting experience. And then the last thing is that the people from Marblehead, I'm so glad that you mentioned, because I think about the family that took me in Marblehead, and I often wonder whatever happened to them. But the folks in Marblehead, not only did they treat us as the crew like gold, and I mean gold, they treated the ship and just the whole operation, the whole community of Marblehead really treated old Ironsides, the vessel, and everything that day was all about as well as it could have been. I mean, I don't think it could have been done any better. Yeah.
All right, so what do we want to talk about now? Chief? I think.
I'd like to bring up one more quick thing. So after the sale, we were on this very high, and we had a vision to go higher. The Navy had bought into it, and they allowed us to increase the size of the crew. So I had the task of going to boot camp up to Great Lakes to screen the 20 or so new sailors that we were going to bring into the fold. First thing I'd ask them was, are you scared of heights? But they came to the ship, and they were great Americans, and you guys were their heroes because you had sailed the ship before. We had sailed the ship before. So it really was for them. The preparation, we sailed the Eagle down to Puerto Rico again. And we were on a high. We took the ship through its 200th birthday, which was a huge thing. We had so many big events, and I'm going to say it, the day that it came out that we weren't going to do Chris's vision was kind of a shock and a lot of disappointment. But we moved on, but I hope to see some things in the future.
With regard to that vision, I just wanted to make sure that everybody understands that USS Constitution is now designated as America's ship of state, and that's because of Chris's vision. So while she didn't make it yet to New York City, if that's going to be, if it may happen in the future, that's for someone else. But Chris's vision of making this America's ship was accomplished and recognized in the Congress, and it's a very important step for America as a nation, and Chris made that happen. I just want to make sure that everybody understands what he did accomplish during his command tour. Well done, sir.
I just have one more thing to say in regards to Christopher Melhuish. I had the honor to serve under both of these men, and when the captain retired and Commander Melhuish took over, obviously losing Commander Beck, him leaving was tough. I mean, it was like, wow, okay, like who is gonna come and fill these shoes? And this gentleman comes and just literally took that ball and kept running. And the morale did not skip a beat, sir. As much as we loved and revered Michael Beck, we felt the exact same about you, sir. So I just wanted to share that. Yes, absolutely. And when I got out of the Navy, when you leave the Constitution, the last person you speak with is the captain. And obviously, I'm pretty sure that's the way it is throughout the military. And so I went to Commander Melhuish's office, and we talked about what I was gonna do, and then we talked about what we had accomplished, and we talked a lot about the sale. And he had told me his vision of to be able to the sail 2000. The last thing I said to him, I looked him in the eye, and I'm like, sir, it was an honor to serve under you. And I said, I really, truly hope and pray that you're able to sail the Constitution. And but you did. And whatever legacy, whatever happens, if she goes out again, it's because of you. So I want you to know that, and I can speak for the crew on this one, that you are just what you did for the ship was incredible. So thank you.
I don't know if this person will ever hear this, but there's another person absent today. We talked about Claire Bloom, the first female executive officer in the history of the ship, and there's not been a female executive officer since, and Claire did an amazing job. So well done, Claire. But the command chief under my time was a man named Joe Wilson. Joe was the first African-American command chief on Constitution, and I don't think there's been one since. But Joe is also the sailing master. So what we do is you give the orders to set sail through the sailing master, and Joe did an incredible job. And I want to acknowledge that Danny took over from Joe, and they shared that responsibility for a while. But two of the most incredible men that I've ever met. And again, I also don't want to take the microphone out of anybody's hand, but I have to thank the Constitution Museum for everything that you guys have done in the mission in making sure Constitution history comes alive for so many kids today. So Anne and your staff, thank you so much for everything.
Well, thank you. It's a privilege for us to be able to share these stories, and it's been wonderful to be able to capture these stories for posterity. And I want to invite all the crew members, all of you here in the room who have recollections, as we wrap up the panel. We still have microphones and recording devices because we want to archive your stories. If there are stories you didn't get to share right now, we want to capture those. We also have paper, a little survey if you wanted to give us some written impressions, because this is our job, is to capture these stories and these moments and these memories and to share them, to use them to inspire the next generation who may be the ones who are going to be on deck or climbing aloft and having to set the next sail on Constitution. So on behalf of the museum and everyone here today, I would like to ask for 3 cheers for Constitution's crew. Hip, hip, huzzah! Hip, hip, huzzah! Hip, hip, huzzah! All right. Thanks for joining us, everyone.